Hello and welcome to the show where we look at how business shapes our world. I'm Stephen Carroll. Coming up, trumping up growth, why the next US president's spending plans could be good news for the global economy. Climbing the Greek debt mountain, how negotiations are underway on a deal to help Athens pay its bailout bills. And we'll be telling you about the expanding Danish supermarket selling food that's past its sell-by date. First up, though, a major endorsement for one of Donald Trump's central economic policies. The Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development says the president-elect's spending plans could boost growth in the United States and help other developed economies too. The assessment is part of the OECD's latest economic outlook, which called on governments to borrow and invest more while interest rates are low. It says with the expected boost from government spending, global economic growth should pick up to 3.3% next year. The organisation expects the United States to grow by more than previously predicted, while growth in the UK will slow to 1.2% as the effect of Brexit kicks in. Well, for more on this, let's speak to Catherine Mann, who's the chief economist at the OECD. Dr. Mann, thank you for speaking to us. You're really putting it up to governments in this latest report. You're saying cut taxes, spend more, because that'll help grow your economies. What sort of effect do you see that having?
Well, we've been asking for about the last 2 years for a rebalancing of policy away from just using monetary policy to use the fiscal instruments more wisely and in conjunction with structural policy. So this is just a continuation of the theme that we've been on. But we've been much more explicit in this economic outlook because we've done quite a bit more research to really help countries identify what are going to be the most important policies for them to take. Some of them have spending to do, some of them have tax cuts to do, all of them have structural reforms that would augment the fiscal levers.
One of the standout lines from this report is you're looking at the situation in the United States after the election. You think that Donald Trump's economic policies will be good not only for the American economy, but for the whole world in terms of growth.
We find that, fiscal spending by large economies, large open economies, are good for global growth. So we show that fiscal spending in China is beneficial for global growth. Fiscal spending, expected fiscal spending, or estimated fiscal spending in the United States is good for global growth. And actually, we have argued that Europe indeed has more room for fiscal spending than they think they do. So these are large open economies. So of course, if they grow, then the rest of the world grows as well.
What sort of promises in Donald Trump's election plans are good for the global economy?
Both candidates had infrastructure as a key part of their economic program, and so we've incorporated that. The Republican tax plan is a potential model for what could be the case for the Trump tax plan. Of course, we don't know that yet, but we've put that in for 2018. So those are the good parts of the possible programs. Now, of course, the downside, the other major part of the economic outlook, is to evaluate trade and evaluate potential costs to the global economy of trade protectionism. That's been another piece of the sort of the profile of a number of different election campaigns around the world, and we show how damaging trade protection can be to global growth.
And give us an idea of those effects with the rise of protectionism. If countries are also engaging in this extra fiscal spending as well, will they balance out or cancel each other out?
Basically, the answer is yes. Global growth would expand if there was infrastructure spending and structural reforms undertaken with that. But on the other hand, a trade war would take it all away. So in the end, there would be spending, but no greater GDP growth. And so, in fact, at the end of the day, you'd end up with a worse fiscal situation than when we started. So that's why we really, on the one hand, want to promote growth underpinned by solid fiscal programs and absolutely want to avoid trade pitfalls.
Now, Donald Trump's election was one election shock we had this year. The other was the UK's decision to leave the European Union. How has that affected your forecast for the United Kingdom?
So we did an exercise back in April on possible short-term financial consequences of Brexit and the longer-term consequences coming through renegotiation of trade agreements. Of course, since April, the financial side of things have been bolstered by a very robust response by the Bank of England that has generated a depreciation of the sterling and have calmed financial markets in general. But the issues going forward are still there about renegotiating the trade arrangements, the consequences for growth associated with those trade arrangements. And so what we find is over the forecast horizon, the UK goes from being one of the most robust of the G7 economies in terms of its growth rate to one of the weakest ones by the time we get to 2018. And that's a pretty big swing for any economy.
Of course, a lot of focus on French politics as well this week. We've got, the new Conservative candidate. We know now he's promising to cut public spending, to cut civil servant numbers in France. Is those the sort of measures that could be helping, or what sort of things do you want to see promising from those election candidates for next year?
Well, of course, there's still plenty of electioneering to go in France. But in terms of rationalizing some government spending, we've argued for a while that some consolidation of administrative and jurisdictions would be in the interests of the budget, but would not hurt the citizens. So that's one avenue. And as I say, the other avenue is to pull forward some tax cuts associated with rationalizing the labor tax wedge. It's sort of how expensive it is to hire a worker. And that would support employment, and that, of course, would support growth.
OK, Catherine Mann, Chief Economist at the OECD, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Meanwhile, another deadline is looming for Greece. The European Union and the IMF have agreed to start talks on reducing the country's debt mountain by the end of the year, if Athens carries out promised reforms to its economy. Eurozone finance ministers will be discussing Greece's progress at a meeting on Monday. Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras believes debt relief is essential to get Greece back on its feet.
And I believe that now it's the correct timing to make the necessary efforts in order to be sure that Greece will recover very rapidly.
Greece has the capacity to recover, and you need and deserve the trust of your partners.
So that sounds fairly optimistic, but how big a mountain does Greece have to climb? And what should we be looking out for at that Eurogroup meeting? Well, Kate Moody has more. Kate.
Stephen, for Athens and its creditors, it is all about debt. Since 2010, Greece has received 3 multi-billion euro bailouts, the latest worth 86 billion euros. That means the country's debt load will top 180% of its total GDP this year. Looming deadlines mean it has to make repayments every few months. And that's led to growing calls for creditors to forgive some of that crippling debt. The International Monetary Fund, in particular, says it's unsustainable and that it won't take part in the latest bailout package unless comprehensive debt relief is included. The IMF also wants European creditors to loosen strict budget surplus targets and take a more realistic long-term view of the Greek economy. Germany is among the staunchest opponents to debt relief, but its parliament could refuse to back the latest deal if the IMF doesn't have a role. Now, if that wasn't complicated enough, the Eurogroup has also called on Athens to undertake still more reforms to its labour market and scrap government protection for people who fail to pay their mortgages. It also wants Athens to commit to a 3.5% primary surplus target. The government says that 2% is as far as it can go next year. Now, Greece's economy has begun to recover, emerging from recession in the third quarter this year for the first time since 2014. But at 23%, its unemployment rate is still the highest in the Eurozone, and more than 20% of the population lives below the poverty line, meaning that strict conditions may still be a hard pill for Greeks to swallow. Stephen?
Kate, thank you very much for that. Now, next to a project that started as a way to cut food waste in Denmark. But demand at the world's first supermarket selling out-of-date food has been so great that it's opened a second branch in Copenhagen. Selling expired produce is legal in Denmark as long as it's safe and clearly labelled. And the bargains on offer are a huge draw to consumers.
It may be past its sell-by date, but for many Danes it's a tasty proposition. A supermarket in Copenhagen selling surplus food has proved to be so popular it recently opened a second store.
I'm here because I support this project. It's awesome that instead of throwing things out, they're choosing to sell it for money. You support a good cause.
The shelves at WeFood are full of products that have passed their expiry date, but also items with damaged packaging or prototypes that never took off.
We source our products from different places in the supply chain. We have a lot of producers that send us a lot of their products. There's a lot of import and export companies who also have some surplus food. And of course, we have an agreement with local supermarkets.
Food waste has been a hot topic in Denmark for years, and one major discount chain has stopped giving bulk discounts so that people don't buy more than they can eat.
Instead of offering 3 products for the price of 2, they've shifted to selling each item individually.
The products at WeFood cost about half of what they would in a regular supermarket and change from one day to the next, depending on what's available. Thanks to its hunger for low-cost food and lower waste, Denmark has managed to reduce the amount of food it throws away by 25% over the past 5 years.
That's all from the People and Profit team for now. If you've any thoughts on the stories that we've been covering, do get in touch on Facebook at France 24 Business, or you can tweet me at NewStephen. Until next time, thanks for watching.